Welcome into the Dead Arm Sports Podcast. Got a little pep in my voice today. It is our college football preview episode. Happy Thursday. We are 2 days away from real football. It feels fantastic.
Let's go.
All right, to get us in the football spirit, Gel, our question of the day today is focused around college football. And I want to know, maybe it's somewhere you've already been. What is your bucket list stadium that you want to get to in college football?
This is the easiest answer of any question of the day you've ever asked. I want to get down to Baton Rouge for an LSU night game. That's bucket list material. I need to, man, at some point. I'm down here. Baton Rouge isn't that far from Dallas. That's a drive that can be done. I mean, not that I'd be driving after the game, of course, knowing that
no.
The stories are that basically you drive on a game day, you get into Baton Rouge, and the streets just smell like bourbon. So
nothing wrong with that.
I gotta get to Baton Rouge for a night game. That sounds just insane.
Yeah, no, one of the biggest stadiums in the country, night game at LSU. I mean, you just see the parking lot before, and people just have their RVs there, just pre-gaming, and just hear epic stories from that. And not only the atmosphere inside of the stadium too, for a night game, the energy is just electric and just looks absolutely awesome. LSU came up to Wisconsin a few years back prior to COVID, playing the Badgers at Lambeau. So got to tailgate with a bunch of LSU fans. They drove their RVs.
They travel pretty well.
Yeah, they travel very well. So it was a blast. Nice people and had an absolute blast. And Badgers won, so definitely a bonus there. But I guess a close second for me too is got to take in a game at the Big House too. I think the Big House would be fun in Michigan, but there wouldn't be anything I don't think that would compare to LSU night game. So that's,
see, the downside of the Big House now is that most of their big games now are being played at noon, or 11 a.m. our Central time. Like they really screwed that up. So it's gonna basically be Big Ten during the day, SEC at night for the most part. I guess that's kind of a win-win for both conferences in a way, but at the same time, just in terms of being able to like have the airtime, you got Big Ten in the day, you got SEC at night, but as a fan, kind of kills the Big Ten fan experience a little bit. Not that I want every Badger game to be a night game, but dude, you've been to how many games at night games at Camp Randall? I mean, that's way better than a Eastern Michigan 11 a.m. kickoff at Camp Randall. So
yeah, no, the energy in the crowd and the atmosphere is a lot more crazy.
You get a full day of Wisconsin tailgating.
Yeah, sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's also bad if you're showing up a few hours before the game having some soda pops, but a guy sitting in the row in front of you slurring his words and has been obviously drinking since he got up this morning. Sometimes it ruins it a little bit, but for the most part, no, night games are premier and are just a blast. So no, it's LSU. So, and that, again, I get why the Big Ten did it. Nobody really had any big 11 o'clock kickoffs or Central time. That's where we're recording. So it's always the 11 Central game for us. None of this noon bullshit that you have on the East Coast. But
those poor guys out on the West Coast, USC, UCLA coming in for a nice ripe 9 a.m. kickoff.
Yeah, playing
on
Rutgers.
Their time. Yikes. Bars better start opening at 7.
Right. We can be found at Dead Arm Sports, Twitter, Instagram. Check us out on Facebook at Dead Arm Sports. You want to follow Gel, he can be found at DASJEL. If you can spell that, is at Das Gel. I'm at Das JPEG at DASJPEC. So send us any questions there. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page. Click the bell.
Real mind trick there.
Live episodes drop. got a lot of content coming out. Listen to the NBA episode earlier this week. I hate the NBA, but solid episode there from you and Crit. Did appreciate that. So you can get all of your sports content just flowing free from Dead Arm Sports. Speaking of flowing free, Gel, saw you take a little sip there. What you rocking this episode?
I was gonna say, speaking of flowing free, but you stole my line. Oh shoot! I've got a Busch in the fridge. If we're socializing, I'll go grab that. But I got a Miller Lite in the glass now.
Oh, boo.
I'll go grab that Busch while you're.
I am sipping on a Truly lemonade after I drink my Busch Light.
Hey, all right. Why don't you kick off the next topic? I'll go grab my latte and then we can get social.
Sounds good. Speaking of kicking off, week 0 is upon us. Historically, not the greatest slate of games, but again, it is football nonetheless. Football that matters, football that counts. And with some of these matchups, again, not great, but you get some okay matchups, have some divisional battles kicking off. You got North Carolina in action this week. Some of the big schools, some of the smaller schools as well. Handful of games, probably about 12 to 15 games. And there's really no better way to kick off a season than the Big Ten sending their 2 finest teams to Dublin, Ireland, and Nebraska and Northwestern. So that'll be one of the games to kick it off. And the SEC following suit and sending their best team, Vanderbilt, out to the Pacific Islands of Hawaii. So got 2 of those matchups kicking off. It should be a good game. We'll see what Nebraska got. Was it Thompson that came in from Texas, replacing Adrian Martinez?
Finally, I thought Adrian Martinez was never going to leave.
Yeah, no,
it seemed like he was there for
a
decade
State,
and a half.
And he transferred. He's still playing. He's at Kansas State, I believe.
How does he have eligibility?
I don't know.
What is going on?
Yeah, got to be the COVID year. That's what I'm.
So
saying.
What is he, a 6-year starter now at this point? He's got to be he's got to be close to 30.
Yeah, no, for sure. This is
This is like when who's that Oklahoma State quarterback that was their starter at like age 29?
Oh, Brandon Weeden.
That's it.
They got drafted by the Browns. Shocker.
Of course the Browns do it. Brutal.
But no, either way, it's week 0, so get us into the football mindset, and got a couple news articles to touch on here before we kick off our preview show. Kevin Warren, Big Ten commish, is talking about 20 teams in the Big Ten, so that's not going to be happening this year, next year, but sounds like it is on the horizon. So I would expect the Big Ten, SEC is probably going to get to 20 here soon, be the 2 power conferences. We'll see what happens with the other ones, but as a Big Ten fan, I'm excited for it. I want more expansion. I want us to be one of the power conferences and be competing with the SEC. Logically, it's got to be more Pac-12 schools, I think, coming in, probably in Oregon, probably in Washington.
Well, you got 4. We're at Big Ten right now is at 16 if you're including USC, UCLA. So you got 4 more teams to go.
Notre Dame, maybe, but
see, this is where that's what I'm thinking is potentially it could be Oregon, Washington, Notre Dame, and do you maybe grab like an Arizona State or a Colorado? Grab that Denver market, by grabbing the Buffaloes.
I mean, it would make sense to get into that mountain time zone there, but I think probably with the Big Ten, they look academics too. It probably is going to end up being Stanford. Maybe I think Stanford probably fits in, which not exciting, but
it's
fine.
Big Ten kind of, you're right. That's kind of the way that they operate. I'm excited. It also definitely makes the current Big Ten West versus Big Ten East. It's pretty loaded on the East in comparison to the West. So, I mean, given that you've got Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, Michigan State all in the East and the West is just kind of loaded with Wisconsin, Iowa, and then mediocrity, really, from if we want to be honest. So breaking that up into the Big Ten West, Big Ten East is going to be a little bit easier, and adding the powers of a USC in Oregon. maybe Washington has had its years. Maybe by jumping into the Big Ten, they could be a little bit more, maybe more recruits will start committing there. I mean, that I don't know what the Seattle recruiting market is necessarily in terms of high schoolers incoming, and talent wise, obviously kind of the Southeast is the king of that, which is why the SEC is right now the dominant conference. But you bring in the entire West Coast into the mix, and you could be looking at a really, really intriguing Big Ten West. The other thing that Kevin Warren mentioned was potentially paying players through the conference. I don't know how that would necessarily work if they stay in the NCAA, because with the NCAA, you've got Title IX involved, and that means you have to have an equal number of scholarships available to men's sports and women's sports. I don't know how, at that point, do you have to have equal pay for all men's and women's athletes if you're doing it through the NCAA, and if with Title IX there, you'd kind of have to. So I wonder if this means that the Big Ten pulls itself out of the NCAA. Are you following my logic here?
Yeah. Well, there was rumors coming out last week that, I believe it was last week or over the weekend, that some of the, school presidents had met, and they were just kind of kicking the tires on possibly removing college football itself from the NCAA and not having to be affiliated with the NCAA anymore. So college football playoffs aren't run by the NCAA. So
true.
We have that at least as a model, but it's kind of unprecedented to even think about at this point in time. But that might be somewhere where they go if they're looking to pay athletes and just kind of.
I think it's the only way you can
the NCAA out. Yeah, that would be, because otherwise, I don't know what else you would do unless by paying their players, they're giving every athlete $1,000 a season or something.
And if that's what they're going to do, then
salaries, but
like they've got money. I mean, they've obviously got the money to do that. They're raking in that this new TV deal between CBS, ESPN, ABC, and Fox. That new agreement that starts when USC and UCLA come into the fold is $1 billion per season for 7 years. So they've got money to pay these players if they want to. I don't think there's too many schools that are, UCLA actually, their athletic department is $100 million in the red at right now, which is crazy. Given how, so that means that they're out there at least dedicating a shit ton of expenses towards it. They're just not bringing in the revenue because their teams have not been any good lately. But now this new deal with the Big Ten right now, each team is slated to bring in $70 million a year. So that's going to be an easy way for them to at least cut into that deficit that they're currently running. But yeah, I think the only way, if they stick with the NCAA and they want to pay players in the future, is to have, okay, we'll give you a scholarship, room and board, meals, whatever they're currently offering, books.
They still have books. Isn't everything probably online now?
Good point. I think Chegg is probably out of business at this point. Thankfully, Amazon pivoted off of being a bookstore, but yeah, you'd have to give, if you're going to pay through the conference, if you're still in the NCAA, Title IX's the big stop sign that'd be in the way. So who knows? We may be looking at something similar to the college football playoff, where it's run by a completely separate entity. I would be down with that, because then that offers an opportunity to also bring in a CEO or a Roger Goodell commissioner type of figure into college football, which, with how big college football is, for them to not have kind of a central figure like Roger Goodell, it makes no sense. Every conference is run separately. Every university is run separately. This is why we have freaking Alabama playing, Chattanooga, Eastern State every year as with these cupcakes. So if we can eliminate that, I'm cool. But I don't know. It feels like this is just the beginning. I mean, Oklahoma, Texas moving to the SEC. That was step one of what I think is going to be a mass transformation of college football.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought up Alabama too. That was our next topic. Nick Saban signing an 8-year, $93.6 million extension, making him the highest paid
Chump
coach,
change.
which he should be paid as the highest paid coach. He's the best college football coach probably ever at this point in time. But
I'm going to give it to him.
Yeah. But no, 8 years, that's a lot. He's in the 70s right now. So yeah, but good for him. That's fantastic. And
I mean, he can always walk away whenever he wants to.
Sure. Yeah,
I don't think
enough money.
I don't think he's gonna slip. He's too dedicated, I think, to this sport. He doesn't live a extremely lavish lifestyle. I mean, he lives in Alabama. It's a nice place, but it's not, it's not like the Lincoln Riley, giant bachelor pad type of, beach house that he's rocking there. Not the Cliff Kingsbury, what we saw on draft day when they were drafting from home. So it's, nice, modest life, and he gets to focus on football. And like you said, obviously more than deserving of being the highest paid football coach in the country.
Yep. And Nick Saban's Alabama Crimson Tide will be kicking off the season in the AP poll as the number 1 team in the country, followed up by Ohio State, Georgia, and Clemson. So 4 teams that we usually don't see towards the top, rolling in as the favorites. But psych, they are always up there. So no shock there. What were some of the surprises, or what were some of your takeaways from this AP poll, this preseason one that came out?
Just one quick note regarding Alabama being at the top. There's 64 total AP voters that vote on this. They got 54 of the 64 first place votes. Ohio State got 6, Georgia got 3, they're second and third respectively. And there's 1 vote left. Somebody gave it to unranked University of Texas. Is this Steve Sarkisian's uncle or something? Or is it Sark himself? Like, how is that possible?
There's been a theory rolling around that it was Nick Saban, so that way it looked even better when they play them week 2 in Texas.
Oh yeah, they did get a first place vote. Yeah, that's great. No, I my first major takeaway revolves around the Brian Kelly departure from Notre Dame, moving to LSU. Notre Dame is ranked at number 5 in the preseason AP poll, and LSU is unranked. I believe they're sitting at like 31, so they're outside that top 25.
Yeah, they've got 55 votes, but they're 25. Tennessee's next, Texas, Iowa, Penn State, and then LSU.
So they're right around 30 then.
Yep.
That to me is too big of a discrepancy. I think that, I think Marcus Freeman's going to do a fine job at Notre Dame, but a first-time head coach at a school like that, I just think that's a very tall task. We saw how Notre Dame looked pre-Brian Kelly, and it was not a pretty picture. I mean, they were running through coaches left and right. Charlie Weiss as the largest example.
In more ways than one
in terms of stature, physical stature. So I'm not saying that Notre Dame's gonna fall off to that level, because I think Brian Kelly, it's still a talented team. Marcus Freeman's legit. Tommy Rees is a legit offensive coordinator. I think Tommy Rees is going to be one of the next guys in line to potentially become a hot name for a head coaching candidate once we get past this season. He did say that other teams have already reached out to him in a podcast that I was listening to, hosted by Ryan Russillo, actually. So I think that I just don't see how there can be that big of a discrepancy between Notre Dame and LSU to the point where LSU is unranked. They do have an incoming transfer quarterback. So that's, I think, a positive. And LSU's they're always rich with talent. I mean, they're even in their shitty years, they still were cranking out guys into the NFL. Last year, yeah, obviously a down year, but was Ed Orgeron really he wasn't that good of a head coach, I don't think.
No,
the only reason LSU won that title, it had nothing to do with Ed Orgeron. It has everything to do with Joe Burrow, fucking Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Randy Moss's kid, that defense, Derek Stingley on that defense.
Thaddeus Moss.
Thaddeus.
Randy's kid. Nice.
So, I mean, LSU is going to be talented, and it's not like Orgeron was a bad recruiter. He got all those guys to the school. So I think there's going to be a lot of talent, and Brian Kelly's a coach that can, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if LSU finishes the season as a top 10 team, and I wouldn't be surprised if Notre Dame falls out of the top 10 by season's end here.
Yeah, no, Notre Dame was one that jumped out. The LSU one, switching coaches, you got a lot of guys that transferred in and out with Brian Kelly coming over with that. So I would have liked to see them maybe in the 20s just to start off the season ranked, not anything crazy. But Notre Dame to me is one, they had a lot of turnover. Like you said, Brian Kelly's out. Marcus Freeman in, which, like you said, he's going to be a good coach. I don't have any worries there. But, I mean, Jack Cohn was their starter last year, and they've got sophomores and freshmen that are going to be taking over this year. So unproven quarterback coming in, ranked number 5 in the country. And we're going to get to see how this ranking plays out right off the bat because they have a hot date with Ohio State week 1. So we'll get to see exactly what this Notre Dame team looks like and if they're able to compete with national champion favorite in the Ohio State Buckeyes. So that was one that jumped out to me. The other one too that was a little bit surprising for me was Cincinnati coming in ranked at 23. Lost Sauce, lost Kobe Bryant on defense, Desmond Ridder, a lot of turnover there. So, by the way, we're recording on the 23rd. I believe Kobe would have been 44 today. If I'm not mistaken. Yep. So, happy birthday,
8/23 is his birthday. Same birthday month as yours truly.
And yours truly.
Attaboy Kobe.
Yes. But no, just a lot of turnover there. Obviously, Luke Fickell's a great coach and one that we were kind of surprised that he didn't take another head coaching job this offseason. Maybe he's waiting for something else. But I was a little bit surprised that they popped into the rankings here with just so much turnover and guys that were huge impact players for them last year.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess, but 23, it's not like that's that high. They did make the college football playoff last year. Yes, They did have obviously a ton of turnover, Desmond Ridder and the two corners that you mentioned. But I don't know. I think I'm fine with them being late top 25. They're still, it's still that same coaching staff. And you'd assume that if Luke Fickell was able to, get some high-end recruits or at least develop some of these high-end, some of these guys like a Sauce Gardner, like a Kobe, like a Desmond Ridder, and turn them from probably not extremely high-end recruits to very, draftable NFL-ready guys, that other recruits see that and recognize that. It's not like the Badgers get that many high-end recruits, but we still end up finding ourselves in the top 25 every single year. Yeah. So I think it's fine to have them in the top 25 personally. 23 feels about right, though, to me. It's not.
Do you think LSU should be there over Cincinnati, though?
I think LSU should be ahead of Cincinnati. Yeah. I think LSU is going to do some shit this year, but Luke Fickell, I'm surprised he's still there, man. I'm surprised that nobody's come after him and offered him, whatever he needs to get, because Cincinnati, let's be honest, Cincinnati football, not an extremely rich history. So Travis Kelce, I believe, was a Bearcat. No. Yes? Maybe. We'll go with that. So I'm ultimately fine with that. They do kick off the season against Arkansas, so that'll be kind of a nice little test. Arkansas ranked at 19. So really, I mean, a test right off the bat and to see if they are worthy of being a top 25 team. I'm going to jump back into the top 10 again, and I'm going to go over to Texas A&M at number 6. They had a great, and they have a historic incoming freshman class. Yeah. But that doesn't mean shit this year. I really, that's why I don't think that they should be a top 10 team. Their quarterback, Haynes King.
Yep. And Max Johnson transferred in from LSU too. Yep.
So, like, I mean, two middle of the road quarterbacks. King certainly looks like, I mean, he flashed. He was a very high end recruit, but he hasn't really popped at the college level. Max Johnson last year, you saw how that season ended up for LSU. So certainly
fun
not
fact,
great, Bob.
Max Johnson's dad is former Tampa Bay Buccaneer great Brad Johnson.
Good old BJ. But
nice.
But yeah, I just don't see. I don't think that they deserve to be ranked this high. They've maybe 2 years out. Maybe even to begin next year, I could see them being in the top 10, top 8, top 6. But just because you have a great freshman recruiting class, that doesn't mean that recruiting class is going to pop their freshman year. That doesn't happen historically. You're talking about a completely different level of football. So you were playing against high school kids, and now you're playing against, 21, 22, 23-year-olds. There's a difference in everything: body type, athleticism, athletic ability, just overall size that changes so much from high school to college. So
yeah. Well, and it's not like it's USC coming in with a historic recruiting class where there's not much competition out in the Pac-12 right now outside of Utah, Oregon. We'll get into that conference a little bit later on, but it's the SEC. You're in the SEC West with Alabama, Auburn, LSU, some of these just phenomenal teams that you're having to compete with, and to put them at 6, like you said, you're putting a ton of pressure on these incoming freshmen to be performing right out of the gate, which historically you don't see. So no,
their week 2 is against Appalachian State. If you remember that 2007 game against Michigan, could it happen again?
Yep. And I believe on A&M's schedule this year is Miami. So
Miami's
up and coming
there.
program. So they have a tough non-conference schedule this year.
Auburn, Ole Miss, LSU also on that schedule. Of course, you're talking about the SEC. Not to steal Bill Belichick's the Super Bowl parade when he starts chanting, "No days off." No days off, but really no weeks off for A&M. I mean, Miami, that Miami game week 3 through the end of the season, no cupcakes.
Yeah. So no, it'll be interesting there. It mentioned USC coming in at 14. So I think that's pretty fitting for them. It's always exciting to see them in the rankings, as much as some people don't like that, but I'm excited to see them. And any other teams that you wanted to talk about in the poll? Otherwise, I wanted to jump into USC and some of the players I'm excited to watch this year.
I was actually going to bring up USC, Miami, Texas. Okay. Those are 3 of the big brands, 3 of the biggest brands in college football that have been down for
a while.
I mean, two full recruiting classes, meaning like 8 years, 2 full cycles of recruiting classes.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, Miami made
they did make an Orange Bowl
against the Badgers.
Yeah, that's right. But still, I mean, that was kind of a 1-year deal. Yeah. Badgers kicked their ass.
Yes,
that was a dominant performance. Happy as a Badger fan about that one. But yes, USC right now coming in at 14, Miami coming in at 16, Texas number 1 overall vote, but also officially unranked outside the top 25. So what do you, I mean, just looking at these three big glamorous programs, how do you see them faring this year and going forward? And I guess let's just stick with this year. Do you think these rankings are fair, and how do you see them finishing out?
I think they're pretty fair. USC, again, the Pac-12 is still not where it has been in the past. You're going to have Oregon that's going to compete. They've got a first-year head coach there, though, so we'll see what ends up happening there. And then Utah is going to be good, and the biggest, I think, threat for me to USC in the Pac-12 this year. So I think USC is fine there. Utah is ranked in the top 10, which they should be as well.
They should be, absolutely.
Almost everybody there, but Miami, ACC's been down, and I think Miami has a chance to compete for the conference this year, especially got TVD, Tyler Van Dyke there as a quarterback, projected NFL first rounder next year right now. So he should be pretty phenomenal there. And Texas is the team I think they're going to have a really solid year this year, but I don't know if that's going to translate to conference champions. They
were 5-7 and lost to Kansas last year.
But you've got Quinn Ewers coming in now. Xavier Worthy's phenomenal.
The Tiger King.
The Tiger King himself. Yeah. Xavier Worthy, Bijan Robinson. So you've got the talent there, but that's a huge jump for them to be competing for a conference championship. Oklahoma State's bringing back Spencer Sanders. Baylor's going to be competing. Oklahoma's got a new head coach. So we'll see what ends up happening there as well. And so you got Big 12 kind of up for grabs. Texas is going to be good. Arch Manning's going to be coming in next year. So the hype is just building and building and building for Texas. If Texas is back and they have a good season, they're one of those teams that could jump into national championship conversation very quickly, because that's one of the premier programs in the country. Everybody wants to play for Texas. And if Texas is one of those top teams, and with them moving over to the SEC, the sky's the limit for them. And it's going to be interesting to watch. But I think for this season, it's USC. Again, Miami, I think will be fine. And then I think Texas will be probably top 3 in the Big 12. So that's kind of where I sit there.
Yeah, I'll get into some of my thoughts on how I think that Big 12 will shake out in a little bit, but we'll get there.
Sounds good. Let's jump over to some of these players that we're excited about. And Quinn Ewers is one that I'm excited about. Didn't get a chance last year at Ohio State with CJ Stroud there, which CJ Stroud was in the national or Heisman conversation. So no surprise there, but Quinn Ewers transferring out, coming back home to Texas, and excited to see what goes on there. Arch Manning, again, like I mentioned a couple minutes ago, is going to be coming in next year. So excited to see what happens with Quinn Ewers. Bijan Robinson is there. Xavier Worthy. It should be a really fun offense to watch in that Big 12. So I'm excited for Quinn Ewers to see what the kids got.
Yeah, Texas native as well. So he's after leaving high school a year early, going to Ohio State, getting his $1.1 million NIL deal, and then dipping out right away to go back to Texas. Guy got paid. Good for him. So savvy move there from Quinn Ewers. However, I've got a few doubts on him just based on some camp reports. They did name him as the starter, but camp reports are that he has not really looked all that sharp. And that's obviously got to be a concern. He did still win that job, but not much competition. And you got to know, this is the part of NIL that maybe is a little bit under discussed, is the fact that now, given that this NIL money is public for the most part, there's going to be a lot of pressure on these there's going to be pressure on the coaches to pay these high dollar players from whatever business is giving it, whether it's Longhorns LLC, AKA the athletic department, just under an LLC name, or what. But there's going to be, I think that Ewers deserves to be that starter, but he is a freshman. He doesn't have much game time in college, and reports offseason reports have not been incredibly impressive. Being down here in Texas, I hear, the rumor mill is loud when it comes to Longhorn football. So I'm tampering my expectations on Texas just a little bit because of that. But obviously Bijan Robinson there, regarded as maybe the top running back in the country, if not top 3. There's definitely talent on that team. The other thing too with Sark, I mean, he hasn't shown as a head coach. Great offensive coordinator. Yeah. He's done it at Alabama. He did it in Atlanta for the Falcons, but hasn't shown that he can be a winning head coach. And just to say it again, 5-7 last season for a team that has way too much talent to do that. I don't know how this is possible, but Texas had 0 guys drafted in this past NFL draft. Like, that's mind-blowing. University of Texas.
Yeah.
That's mind-blowing. Montana State had, I think, 2 guys drafted. So
the powerhouse Montana State.
no shade on Montana State there, but yeah, I don't know. I'm tempering my expectations a little bit on the Longhorns. I'm actually going to stick with the transfer portal, and I really want to see how Ewers performs, see how Caleb Williams performs, moving from OU to USC. Jordan Addison, Biletnikoff Award winner, moving from Pitt over to USC as well. Nice job, Lincoln Riley. And then Jahmyr Gibbs moving from Georgia Georgia Tech up to Alabama, now set in stone to be the lead back at Alabama. And then one other 5-star recruit that moved as well, Eli Ricks, corner, went from LSU to Alabama. So be interesting to see how all those transfers perform. Can they do it year 1, or is there going to be an adjustment period? 2 of those guys going to USC with a new head coach. I guess same head coach for Caleb Williams, but different program still. And then 2 guys going from Georgia Tech and LSU over to Nick Saban's system. So it'll be kind of, I guess I'm just kind of interested to see how those top 5 transfers really, and previously 5-star recruits, how they end up performing in these new programs under new coaching.
Yeah, no, USC was one I had written down just in general with Caleb Williams, Jordan Addison coming over. And yeah, it'll be exciting to see what Lincoln can get going there in his first year. Another one that I'm not as much, I guess, excited to watch, but more curious on is your boy Joe coming in the number 10 in the Heisman favorites this year, Mr. DJ Ukulele. So I want to see what he's got cooking up in Clemson, if last season was just a fluke or what's going on there. You've got Cade Klubnik, highly touted quarterback from Texas, coming over to Clemson this year. So got a little bit of pressure on DJ to perform, because Cade's not the next Trevor Lawrence or anything like that, but he will at least put some pressure.
5-star recruit.
Their fans will be at least clamoring for some quarterback change if DJ gets off to a slow start again this year.
Yeah, Clemson comes in at number 4 in the AP top 25. They finished the season at 14. So that's a 10-spot jump, and jumping
their
from
defense
14
is going to be sick this year, though.
They did lose their defensive coordinator.
Yeah. So we'll see how that plays out,
but they do have Clemson had a down year and they still won 9 games. So that tells you about that program and
crazy
the status of that program, which is just that's ridiculous. But yeah, Ukulele, he was previously thought of as pretty much a lock number 1 overall pick in the future. And last year did not perform even close to that level. So hopefully he's matured, a little bit more focused going into this season. He knows that this is the year that he has to really, really make that jump if he wants to make a run at, a number 1, a number 1 pick, a top 5 pick, a top 10 pick, because based on last season's performance, he's not a first round pick. So he's got a lot to show. I think both him and Dabo hopefully come in with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder if they are planning on being a college football playoff team, because right now, based on the top 4, of Bama, Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson. Obviously, Clemson falls in there. So, but if he plays the way that he did, no chance that they're going to be there. And golly, he could end up getting benched for a true freshman, which that'd be a bit of a shame to be going, future number one overall pick to potentially being benched. That's pretty rough.
Yes.
One other, I'm going to stick with the quarterbacks then. And I'm going to go all the way to the other side of the country to the hashtag PNW Pacific Northwest.
Washington State Cougs action.
I've got my eyes on Cameron Ward, quarterback out of previously played for the Incarnate World Cardinals, an FCS school. I don't know what Incarnate World is.
Incarnate Word.
Is that what?
Yeah, it's
Word, not world. Not like Sea World.
I believe it's in HBCU, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. So, I mean, 0-star recruit coming out of high school, but go look him up on YouTube. Yeah, because he looks. I mean,
I've got my eye on him too, Joe. If you know what I mean.
Shit. So there's certainly a lot to like there. He kind of has a very similar comp. The way that he plays, pretty similar to a Lamar Jackson type. He's got that really quick release, plenty of speed. I mean, can fit the ball into tight windows, great velocity on his ball. And somebody coming from a 0-star recruit goes to an HBCU to now translating over, moving over to Washington State. That's pretty nice. That's, that's a pretty nice jump from a 0-star up to there. So up to, an FBS and being potentially a high-end pick. We'll see how he performs on the big stage. He tore it up against FCS competition, won the most outstanding freshman in FCS. That is known as the Jerry Rice Award. Nice. For you,
keeping track.
If you're a trivia, if you're a trivia nerd, maybe hang on to that one. But yeah, I seriously go on to, if you haven't, go on to YouTube and just look at his highlights. He's a special player.
He was looking just like it was in a video game last year. Some of his highlights that he was throwing out there.
Ridiculous.
So it'll be interesting. I mean, I don't expect that to put Washington State on the map at all or have them competing at all, but it'll be at least fun to watch and they'll have a fun offense nonetheless to check out with Cam Ward there. But
it's too bad Mike Leach isn't still out there.
Yeah, a little air raid action.
Imagine that. That'd be so hot.
Yes. Oh yeah. Anybody else, Joe, before we should get into our predictions here?
Just one last guy to keep an eye on is that I'm intrigued to see what kind of a climb he can make is Will Anderson.
Yeah.
I'm just curious to see if he can jump both Stroud and his teammate Bryce Young for both the Heisman and for that number 1, number 2 overall pick in the draft, because right now it's Stroud and Young are 1 and 2 for both NFL draft and Heisman predictions. So Will Anderson is
he's a monster.
Crazy,
just
ridiculous, monster. Absolute monster, athletic freak. I just want to see if he can do it. If he can jump those guys and be one of those really be able to jump some of these two transcendent quarterbacks in Stroud and Young.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's go alphabetically here. Jill and I are going to give you conference champion predictions. We will kick it off with the Atlantic Coast Conference, aka the ACC. What do you got going on there, Jill?
I was genuinely torn here between Clemson and Pitt. Pitt obviously coming off their the ACC championship that they held last year. They did lose Kenny Pickett. If you need to know my thoughts on his NFL prospects, tune into our last episode. Uh, but they did bring in Keaton Slovis, former USC quarterback, transferred over there. He'll be the day one starter, high-end recruit. USC was just an absolute disaster under Clay Helton, but I think Slovis he's got the skill set to be a high-end quarterback. And the ACC is still, I think, overall down as a conference. We don't know what we're going to get out of Miami. And based on, and if Clemson plays the way that they did last year, I think Pitt should remain the favorite in the ACC on my side. But ultimately, I didn't pull the trigger. I didn't have the stones to do it. And I'm gonna go chalk here and go Clemson, and thinking Ukulele's gonna. By the way, his real name is Uyunglele.
Yeah,
Ukulele is just a little better, easier on the not quite the tongue twister, but but I think that Clemson's going to get back to their winning ways, their conference championship ways, and they'll take the ACC.
All right. Yeah, I was kind of torn between Clemson. I've got them in the championship game for the ACC, but have them going down to a team we talked about a little bit earlier in the AP poll, and that is the Miami Hurricanes. I like Mario Cristobal's team this year with
Cristobal's legit, dude.
Tyler Van Dyke. I think he's going to take a step forward, show why scouts are touting him as a day one draft pick on Thursday next year. But I don't know. They don't have a ton to compete with in their division. You got Pitt there, so they've got a couple tough games in there. But I just think ultimately Clemson's going to falter, and I think Clemson's going to slip up one of the conference games, whether that is at a Boston College. NC State's got a good program this year too, with Devin Leary, so that could be one. It is a home game for Clemson, so that should be a big one. And ultimately, I think Clemson's finally going to fall to South Carolina this year in Columbia. So
of course
I think
you
that
do.
Could, yeah, of course I do. But I've got so I have them faltering there and maybe get knocked out of the championship game. I think ultimately they will make it there, but I like Miami this year, so I'm gonna go away from Clemson. Clemson maybe 2 down years and have Miami in there. So we'll
yeah, I'm a big Mario Cristobal fan, so I can't fault you there. I think one of the first things that he did to, when he became that head coach is get rid of that turnover chain. I think he's ready to be kind of done with those gimmicks that the previous coaching regime did. So nice little culture shift there, getting rid of that turnover chain, which was kind of cool. But like, if Miami is really relevant, they don't need a freaking turnover chain. They just can do it on the field. And Mario Cristobal is a former offensive lineman, massive ass dude, just big presence, came from Miami, really knows that area, knows that recruiting base. So Miami's got, I think, an extremely bright future. I just don't know if it's going to be this year for them. I think Pitt has a chance to return just based on, pedigree of being the champs last year. And then Clemson, just as the way that, they're Clemson. They just, they've just over the last, basically since Kelly
2010s.
Yeah, you're looking at a decade, so potentially. So
no. All right, next conference up alphabetically. We're going to move on to the Big 12, and Baylor is the defending champions.
How is that alphabetical over the Big 10?
Yeah. I don't know. Well, it's on ESPN when you scroll through, and Big 12's in front of the Big 10. So that's the way I guess I should specify then. That's the way I went, was on ESPN scrolling through. So yeah, no, that does not make
doesn't work alphanumerically or just straight up spelling wise.
Yes. Nonetheless, should be a good battle. I think you could make your case for 4 teams probably this year. If you're in the belief that Texas is back, you could go with Texas. Baylor should be pretty solid still. Oklahoma's usually got the recruiting class in there, got the guys, but again, first year head coach Lincoln Riley leaving there. And then you got Oklahoma State as well. So you've got 4 teams that I think could walk away with it. And ultimately, I've got a guy finally getting over the hump here. He's a man. He's no longer 40, and that is Mike Gundy's Oklahoma State Cowboys. So I like Spencer Sanders is coming back this year, quarterback there. They've got 2 tough road tests this year. They go at Baylor, at Oklahoma, was it Bedlam, Oklahoma State rivalry there. So going to be a tough stretch, but ultimately I like the experience with Oklahoma State. Made it to that conference championship game last year, had a tough heartbreak to Baylor, lost on a last second goal line stand in one of the epic championship games from championship weekend last year. But I think Oklahoma State gets over the hump here this year and wins the conference.
Oklahoma State,
yes. Sorry.
I'm going to go with who they lost to in that championship game, and I'm going to go with the Baylor Bears. Big fan of Dave Aranda, bringing back a ton of talents. He's turned that program from, what was in genuine hell after the Art Briles disaster and all the sexual assault allegations from their players. Some of those were deemed, they basically said a lot of that coaching staff, a lot of that athletic department at Baylor was complicit in some of these sexual assault, whether it was covering up those situations, whether it was, I don't know if they were, I certainly hope they weren't promoting sexual assault, but they were very complicit in the cover-ups, and they got docked a ton of recruiting, a ton of scholarships, a lot of, it really hurt him in recruiting. Dave Aranda steps in and seemed to really immediately turn around the culture of that university and that program. I really like him as a head coach. Yeah. I think he's going to be, I mentioned that, I mentioned Luke Fickell as a potential, next head coach in line to get a really, really high-end job. I think Dave Aranda's right there too, where he should be in line to get a really high-end job for the next big name school that cans their coach. So absolutely love Dave Aranda. They're returning starting quarterback. That's obviously huge, but Baylor's one of those few teams in the Big 12 that can actually play defense. And I think that's ultimately why I'm going to put them ahead of Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Texas. It's hard to know what's coming out of the Sooners, given that they've lost their starting quarterback. Yes, they did bring in UCF's starter that will slide into Caleb Williams' spot as the new starter.
Gabriel. Is it Dylan Gabriel?
Dylan Gabriel. Yep. So not too shabby of a transition there, I guess, but new head coach. Who knows? They lost a decent amount of talent that was slotted to go to Oklahoma and ended up flipping their commitment and going to USC. So lost momentum from the Sooners side. Texas is not there yet for me. So I like the stability that the Baylor Bears bring, and that's my Big 12 champ.
Nice. Just a note here too, side team, somebody that could make a little bit of noise this year too is Kansas State. You got Deuce Vaughn there, running backs, a monster. And like we mentioned, Martinez transferred in. So just a kind of a team to keep an eye on that could make a little noise there. So.
Martinez. Good God.
But no, for real, keep an eye on Kansas State this year. Just saying that. All right, moving into the conference you and I pay probably the most attention to here, the Big Ten, home of our Wisconsin Badgers. Not sure either of us picked them as our conference champion this year. Gel, is it chalk for you? I mean, is anybody going to dethrone Ohio State this year?
Graham Mertz ain't going to dethrone Ohio State.
We'll see at the end of September.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, it's the Buckeyes for me. CJ Stroud, Travion Henderson, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Julian Fleming. That's just 4 skill position players that they're rolling out this year to replace what they already had as, that loaded wide receiver room remains just as loaded. So, and it's Ohio State. I mean, that they're going to be also additionally, they're going to be pissed off that they lost to Michigan last year, both in the big game and lost the Big Ten to them. So they're going to be pissed. I think they're coming in with a different level of fire. And of course, CJ Stroud, who's right now the Heisman favorite, is in year 2 now. So yeah, it's Buckeyes.
Yeah, same here for me. I'm just going to kind of run through their schedule quick here, just because they don't play hardly anybody on the road worth note. They've got Notre Dame at home, Wisconsin at home. They go to Michigan State, which, yeah, that atmosphere is not the best for an upset. Could possibly pull off an upset, but not likely at all. At Penn State, so that one could get interesting. Usually Penn State hangs with them for a little bit, and then Ohio State is like, nah, we're good. At least try, and then they just run through.
That's about right.
And then at Rutgers, and at Maryland. Or no, Rutgers at home, but they play at Maryland. So that's their other road game. Get Michigan at home this year. So it would not shock me at all if the Buckeyes end up finishing undefeated.
I was going to say they could totally run the table
going into the college football playoff. So no, nobody's competing with them this year. All right, Pac-12 got Oregon Ducks that have been up in that championship game. Utah making the noise last year, and now USC. So what do you see happening here in the Pac-12, Joe?
I got to stick with Utah. I think they're gonna run it back and get the Big 12 championship again. I think they're good I think they're going to be good for 10 wins this season. And that's going to be enough to win. That's going to be enough to win the Pac-12, no doubt. Ton of returning starters. They just have so much continuity there with A, the returning starters. B, Kyle Whittingham has been a sweet head coach. Really built that program, or continued to build that program up. I mean, think about, what was it, 2010 when they beat Alabama in the Sugar Bowl? When they were I think they were in the WAC at that point, and that. And they've just continued to build on that program. So I like Utah a lot this year. Great offensive line as well.
The team that I like quite a bit.
Oh my God.
No, I'm just kidding.
You suck up.
If you're on YouTube, we've got an Oregon State Beavers shirt on that I picked up on my honeymoon, but no, it's Utah. There's no question here for me. Cameron Rising's a name to watch in the quarterback area as well. He's somebody that is hyped up this year as well. So Utah bringing back most of their team too from that epic Rose Bowl game against Ohio State last year. That was one of the better ones to watch as well. So I think they've got a little chip on their shoulder, and they don't have a tough schedule either. They play USC at home this year, have to go to Eugene to face the Ducks there. So that could be a tough road test for them. But outside of that, it's Utah should win the Pac-12, I think, this year. Our last Power 5 conference here before we get into our playoff predictions, wrap up the show, is the SEC, the best conference in the country, and it's Alabama for me. They're just so good, and I think it'll be a fun championship game against Georgia. Again, Georgia should win the East, but Alabama is going to just, I think, run train through everybody. Bryce Young's going to be this showing why and making his case to be the number one pick in the draft this year as well. And I don't see them faltering at all. They have Texas A&M at home this year. Auburn's at home this year. So they've got a nice schedule there to help them out against some of the tougher teams in their conference that they're going to play against. And it's Crimson Tide for me.
And guess who they're facing before that Auburn game? Austin P. What are we doing here? This is what I'm talking about. Saban getting all these,
historically the SEC, they all play cupcake games before their final rivalry game.
It's just like, this is just obnoxious. Like, what do we do? Why is that even allowed?
Yeah.
For Austin P to be coming in at the end of the SEC season. Say that 5 times fast. SEC season. And then of course they've got, they've got their basically preseason game before they play Texas against Utah State. Like, there's just these tune-up games that I think need to be like disallowed. Austin P should not be playing Alabama in the middle of an SEC schedule. So Alabama, I think, is going to run the table. I think 1 and 2 for me are pretty obvious in terms, nationally. Alabama, Ohio State. Those are the 2 teams that I could see running the table. Georgia has a shot to do it as well. I think they are fairly ranked as the number 3 team in the country, but I think ultimately Saban gets his revenge on Kirby Smart in the SEC championship game, and it's Alabama that takes it.
So moving into our college football playoff picks, based on who you've picked for your conference champions, I'm assuming it's pretty much chalk in your top 4 teams in the country right now. Is anybody jumping Clemson? If they win the ACC, I have to believe they're in the college football playoff. But what do you have as your playoff prediction?
Good old Baylor Bears jumping Clemson here.
Okay, so your Baylor's going to have to probably go undefeated then. Maybe
which I think they could do.
Clemson has a loss or two. Okay.
I think Clemson probably does trip up at some point, like you had mentioned. I think they can still win the conference, even with a slip up here. But I mean, Baylor's really, they've got a couple tests with Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, but they do have Oklahoma State at home. Texas is on the road to finish off the year, but I think Baylor is far superior of a team, and I think Texas is going to be out of the mix by year's end. So their final regular season game in Austin doesn't bother me too much. Yeah, that October 1st date against Oklahoma State could be, I guess, maybe a toss up at this point, but it's at least a home game. So I think, and the Oklahoma at the end of November to begin November. Yes, that's obviously, that's going to be a huge game, especially in, at OU, but I really like what Baylor's doing this year. I really like the foundation they've created. There's no drama left in that program, and there's a ton of turnover at Oklahoma. I really like the Baylor Bears this year. Maybe they don't go undefeated. Maybe they go 11-1, but I still think that they can sneak in over a 10-2 Clemson team, for example.
Okay. And assuming then you also have 2 SEC teams getting in with Alabama and Georgia.
Yeah. Okay. Same thing as last year, where they both ended up making it and faced each other in the final.
Okay. I've got pretty much chalk. Alabama, Ohio State are locked in at 1-2. I don't see anybody competing with them at all until the playoff kicks in. So I've got Alabama, Ohio State. I've got Georgia in there as well. I think Georgia is going to be undefeated heading into that SEC championship game. Maybe one loss if they falter somewhere, but that East is just, outside of a Hendon Hooker, Spencer Rattler taking huge steps forward. I can't see Will Levis, and I don't either, but maybe the stars align for one of those games and they end up knocking them off. But I don't see it happening. So I got Georgia in there. And then with Miami knocking off Clemson in that ACC championship game, I see Miami losing on the road to Clemson during the regular season, getting revenge with them going 1-1 head to head. I'm putting the Utah Utes in. I think Utah's, if they win the conference championship, maybe one loss, and Pac-12 finally can say that we're back in the playoff, and they end up getting in there and have to face a tough Alabama team in the first round, being that 4 seed. But hey, you're there. So
I like that. Yeah, I got no issue with Utah getting in there. I think the ACC I think it's going to be down again. So yeah, I think it's going to be one of those, whoever wins the Big 12 or whoever wins the Pac-12. I just don't see an ACC team getting in there, even though the talent is obviously pretty nice with, especially Miami, Clemson. I just don't see them being able to put it together right now to be able to make a Final Four run.
Yep. All right, so that will wrap up our college football preview episode. Happy week 0 to everybody. You can find us at Dead Arm Sports, Twitter, Instagram. Check us out on Facebook at Dead Arm Sports. Make sure you subscribe, click the bell on our YouTube page. That way you know when episodes drop live. You can find Gel at DosGel. I can be found at DosJPEG. Send us in any questions that you have. Fantasy season is upon us. I'm in the midst of all of my drafts right now. So I'm in the heat of our fantasy football draft season. So send us any questions that you have. More than happy to answer those. Again, when we're live, make sure you comment in our chat box, ask us any questions there that you want to. And on your favorite listening platform, subscribe, rate, and review. Send us a screenshot of that review, get you some sticker swag sent out in the mail. What are some of those listening platforms, Joe?
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcasts. Please subscribe, rate, and review, ideally on all 4 platforms. And make sure you're getting making sure that you're hitting us up on every episode that is released. Also, YouTube, search Dead Arm Sports. Our channel should be the first thing that's found at the top of your search results. Hit that, subscribe, hit the button to get you some alerts every time that we go live, every time that we release new content. Make sure you hit that bell so that you do get those notifications. But yeah, as we continue to get deeper into the football season, more content is going to be out for you guys, for you listeners. So we're looking forward to it. And yeah, I can't wait, man.
I can't either. So happy weekend to everybody. Stay safe, and we will be back next week. Joe, close her out.
Can't wait.
Bart Scott.